Kinship terms explained. I've just made this little video to explain some of the basic terms that we use in discussing family trees and genealogy because, while the basic terms are pretty well understood, aunt and uncle and niece and nephew and so forth, by the broader population, some of the more involved ones can just be so obscure for some people that they just tune out completely. And it's really not that complicated if you take a moment to just try and wrap your head around how they're connected. So let's start with you. So the first person on the diagram is you, and we can add in your parent, and we will also give you a sibling, so a brother or a sister. I've marked the direct descent in blue, and then brothers and sisters in green. So we can add in a grandparent for your parent, and of course it goes without saying that everybody on this chart has their own relationship to other people on the chart. So your parent is your parent, but your grandparent is your parent's parent. So we could always shift the focus to the parent, and that would add in another set of references. We'll add in a great-grandparent, a great-great-grandparent, and a great-great-great-grandparent. Sometimes the greats just pile up so much that we end up abbreviating it to second great-grandparent or third great-grandparent and so forth. Okay, so that's the direct descent plus one sibling there. And then we'll also throw in an aunt or uncle. So an aunt or uncle, of course, is your parent's sibling. Of course, I'm only dealing, I should say, with one parent here, but this goes for both sets of parents that you have, and of course, both sets of parents they have, and so on and so forth. But it doesn't really matter in English anyway what term we use for either your mother's or your brothers, so your mother's or your father's brothers or sisters. So an aunt or uncle on either side is your parent's sibling. A great aunt or great uncle is your grandparent's sibling. And they have the same relationship to their sibling as you have to your sibling. So that's the sibling relationship between those different people on your tree. Let's throw in, we'll also throw in a great-great aunt or uncle. At this point, people start to wonder what we're talking about, but we're simply saying by great-great aunt or great-great uncle, a great-grandparent's sibling. And we could extend it all the way to the dawn of time, just adding more and more greats. You'll notice that there's one extra great in the term for the sibling of a grandparent, because the grand in grandparent is itself a great. If we had great-grand-aunt, it would be a little more clear that the great-grand-aunt is the sister of the great-grandparent. But for whatever reason, we don't really say grand-aunt or grand-uncle. We just say great-aunt or great-uncle. So we have to reckon that there's going to be one more instance of the word great in a great-great-aunt or great-great-uncle's term than there is in the great-grandparent's equivalent term. So that's just something to be wary of. Okay, so in other words, they have the same sibling relationship to the great-grandparent that the great aunt or uncle has to the grandparent, the aunt or uncle has to the parent, and that your sibling has to you. Okay, so much for great aunts and uncles and so forth. Let's turn to cousins. So here we'll just illustrate on this chart what a first cousin is, what a second cousin is, and what a third cousin is. And we could go on forever to, third cousins, fourth cousins, fifth cousins, and so on and so forth, up to the Garden of Eden. Okay, so the first cousin is the child of your aunt or uncle. And that means that with your first cousin, you share a grandparent. That's the definition of what a first cousin is for you. And your mutual first cousins, I should say. So your first cousin regards you as his or her first cousin as well. Your second cousin is a descendant not of your aunt or uncle, but of your great aunt or uncle. So you share, therefore, not a grandparent, but a great-grandparent with your second cousin. And so with your third cousin as well, that third cousin is a descendant of your great-great aunt or uncle. And with that third cousin, you share a great-great-grandparent. So that, in a nutshell, is what a first cousin, second cousin, and third cousin are. Now, where it starts to sound complicated and become a little bit mind-bending is these intermediary steps you see that I have not yet marked here, which is the people between the great aunt or great-great aunt and the second cousin and third cousin. There's no intermediary step between an aunt or uncle and your first cousin, but you can see these other intermediary steps occur there. And this is where people start to think we're talking about, Bilbo's farewell speech in The Lord of the Rings, where he thanks all his numerous relations, and people start to tune out. But it really is not that complicated if you can think of it in terms of your parents and grandparents. So the first cousin once removed, that's the step between your great aunt and uncle and your second cousin, and it's so called because your first cousin once removed is your parents' first cousin. The once removed signifies that if you go up one step in your own tree, you'll get to your parent, and then that relative, your parent, has that person as the first cousin. So a first cousin has the same relationship to your parent that you have to your first cousin. So your first cousin once removed has the same relationship to your parent as you have to your first cousin. That's what the once removed signifies. The first cousin twice removed is if you go up to your grandparents, so 2 degrees of removal, and then that grandparent has your first cousin twice removed as their first cousin. So stands in the same relationship to your grandparent as your first cousin once removed stands to your parent, or that you stand to your first cousin. Beneath the first cousin twice removed is the second cousin once removed, because that person has the same relationship to your parent that you have to your second cousin. That is to say, that second cousin once removed is your parent's second cousin, and they share a great-grandparent who is your great-great-grandparent, but is for them, each of them, the great-grandparent, just as for you and your second cousin, what you have in common is the great-grandparent. So now let's just take it down below the current generation, and we can add in the niece or nephew, so that's the child of your sibling. So this is where we have some specific kinship terms, whereas you're a first cousin with your first cousin is your first cousin, and you are your first cousin's first cousin. Your niece or nephew regards you as your niece or nephew's aunt or uncle. And if we take it down another notch, then we get to great niece or nephew. Another notch beyond that, and it's the great-great niece or nephew. So if we then, so that's, the same sort of thing that we get with the aunts or uncles. You just keep adding greats to the niece or nephew relationship. With the cousins, that's when we get into degrees of removal below. So your first cousin's child for you is your first cousin once removed. The first cousin's grandchild is your first cousin twice removed. And the first cousin's great-grandchild is your first cousin 3 times removed. And so too with any other cousin, whether it's first cousin, second cousin, third cousin, whatever it may be. The child of that person is 1 degree removed from that person. So your third cousin's child is your third cousin once removed. Your third cousin's grandchild is your third cousin twice removed, because it's 2 generations back to the third cousin. And the third cousin's great-grandchild is your third cousin 3 times removed. We can also add in your own descent. So your child, your grandchild, your great-grandchild, and so forth. And there we can see the opposite relationships as above you starting to occur, right? So your your niece or nephew is the first cousin of your child. Your first cousin's child, your first cousin once removed, is the second cousin of your child, because both of them have taken 1 step down, and they now share not the grandparent that you and your first cousin shared, but rather a great-grandparent. Your grandparent is their great-grandparent, and so they are now second cousins. And so too with the child of the third cousin, that will be, so your third cousin once removed will be your child's fourth cousin, because they are now a full generation down from you and your third cousin, and so they have become fourth cousins. And we could take this on forever. So their children of that generation in turn will go from where their parents were fourth cousins, they will now be fifth cousins. Where their parents were first cousins, they will be second cousins. Where their parents were second cousins, they will be third cousins, and so on and so forth. So that, in a nutshell, is how cousinage and unclehood and aunthood all work. I hope this video has been useful, and I hope you won't balk at hearing some of these terms, because they actually do make sense once you have seen them in operation a little bit. You can think of them in terms of your own family a bit. Just remember that we're fundamentally dealing with who is whose sibling and how far people are removed from a common ancestor, a common grandparent, great-grandparent, and so forth. Thank you very much for listening.